Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is the top of the hour. Mike and I want to welcome you to this one-day online workshop. So in light of everything going on, we just want to tell you thank you so much for joining us today. It's part of our commitment to all of you to keep the learning and the engagement going as we sort of navigate through these interesting times. So thanks, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. Want to cover a couple of items of business before we jump in, since we have so much to cover. We will be together for most of the day today, so I want to just reiterate to everybody. Oops, I'm not showing my screen. Let me go ahead and do that. I want to just reiterate to everybody that the webinar or this workshop is going to be recorded. So if for whatever reason you have to pop in and out or you miss something, not to worry. We're going to be sending a link to these modules that we're covering today to everybody that has registered, including as many of the question and answers that we get. Now, speaking of questions, in the GoToWebinar console, there is a question panel. We would encourage you to use that to ask questions, and we're going to do our best to get to as many as we can at the end. I'm going to pull up the agenda in just a second. So we'll try to get to everybody, but if we don't get to you, it's okay. We'll still try to do our best to get to you after the fact. Speaking of the agenda, I want to cover that quickly, since we realize many of you are joining from many parts of the world right now. So we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So this is what we're going to do today. For the first hour, we're going to provide an overview of MadCap Flare. Many of you are new to the software and may not be used to concepts of content management and single sourcing and content reuse. So we're going to be covering those basics. Then we're going to have a break. Then we're going to come back in, talk about Central and Flare and where that fits in. We'll have another hour break for our lunch in our neck of the woods, but depending on where you are, it may be different. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about content reuse and maximizing those concepts, and then modern design with CSS. And then Mike and I will come back together at the end of the day for a Q&A. So we wanted to provide breaks in the middle to give your brain a little bit of rest. And again, we have so much to cover today, so we're going to do our best to finish on time and stay on track, given the fact that so many of you are joining from all over the world. So again, welcome. Thank you so much. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. First, we're going to start with that overview of MadCap Flare. So I don't expect anybody to be an expert at this at the end of the hour, but I do want to cover some high-level concepts to kind of set the stage, since so many of you are new to our software and our platforms. I did throw my email address up there on the slide. If any of you want to jot that down and get in touch with me after the fact, or perhaps connect on LinkedIn if we're not, I'd love to hear from you. Now, we talk a lot about the authoring and management system here at MadCap Software, and what it is, it's a collective set of tools. It's an entire platform to support authors during the entire authoring, content management, translation, and publishing process. There's a lot of good stuff in AMS. Today's focus, however, is going to be on the two backbone pieces of AMS. So we're going to focus today on Flare and Central. We'll touch on some of these things as we go, not as much detail. So if anybody wants more information about any of these elements and how it all fits together after the fact, please get in touch with me and I'm happy to set something up and talk with you directly. All right, so today's focus, again, mostly Flare and Central. Now, there's really 4 key reasons why companies consider using Flare or transition to Flare for all of their content management needs, and this is important. For one, we can really maximize content reuse. Authors often have the same content strewn across lots of different manuals, and authors are really tired of updating the same content across all of those different manuals whenever there's a change, particularly to the common bits that often live across all of these different manuals. So that's a big thing that we address with our platform. The other thing is this concept of multi-channel publishing. You know, nothing wrong with generating PDF user guides. We can do that. But what if you have a need to get that content out of a PDF or a print-based output? What if we have to have it more searchable and navigable online? What if we want to have a slightly different knowledge base for our internal sales reps or our tech support folks that's a little different than what the external customers see? Or maybe we have to publish this content to another ecosystem altogether, like Zendesk or Salesforce or something else. Or maybe we have to be mindful of screen sizes. How are people accessing this information? Phones, tablets, we have to be mindful of how content responds to those smaller screen sizes. So that's the other problem we solve. All of the content in Flare can be published to many of the different channels that you need to support, print and online. Improve self-service, this is a biggie. When your users can search and find information that they need quickly, they're happier, they're more satisfied, and it frees up your internal teams to help with more challenging issues. Not that you don't want to talk to your customers, but studies show that if people can help themselves quickly, they are happier. And when we get out of a print-based world and we can start getting stuff online, we can do that, and we can start quickly gathering data and analytics to understand, well, how effective is all of this information? Are we giving them information that they need? Is it appropriate for the device that they're on? Are we missing information? Are they searching for stuff that's not in there? And with our tools, we can find that instantaneously, which really increases your return on the investment and all the good content that you're authoring and producing. And then the last thing is we're trying to keep it as flexible and easy to use as possible so that as content authors, you don't have to be XML experts and programmers to achieve all of this functionality. I forgot to do one thing before I began, which was just do a quick technology check. If any of you cannot hear me or if any of you cannot see my screen, please use this opportunity to send a chat or a question. Or if you can't hear me just fine, go ahead and give me the high sign too. We want to make sure you can hear and see everything and that the technology part at least is working today. All right, so in terms of that first content reuse bullet, I want to do a quick comparison. And thank you, by the way. It sounds like you can all hear and see me okay. Now, that first content reuse bullet, I want to kind of level things out here. And I'm using Word as a comparison here because that's ubiquitous. Many of us have it, but this could be Google Docs. This could be Dreamweaver. This could be PowerPoint. It can really be anything. But I use Word since it's common. And what's tricky with Word is that what makes it so easy for us to use are the things that get in the way of content reuse, which was that very first thing we talked about. Because when you work in Word, you're doing things that you probably don't even think about. You're authoring your content, you're embedding your formatting, so what is everything looking like, and you're defining the scope of the document. And what do I mean by scope? Well, if you're writing a user guide for product A, it's always going to be a user guide for product A. If it's a training manual for Department A, it's always a training manual for Department A. So essentially what that document needs to be gets baked right into it, and we can't really reuse anything in there. If you need to make some sort of different version of the guide or different version of the manual. So in my example here, I've got this draft user guide. I've written it. I send it around to the team. Mike takes a look at it and he says, fantastic, Jen. I need you to create a version of that for the standard version of our software and one for the enterprise version. So I have to do this save as exercise and end up with 2 copies that stemmed from that draft. Now there's going to be some differences between them, right? These guys may have slightly different procedures than the enterprise users, but there is going to be quite a bit of overlap in them, even just a little bit. So I can probably deal with 2, but the bigger problem happens when Mike comes to my office and says, Jen, guess what? We're differentiating, we're growing, we're doing more. I need you to create a user guide for the standard product A, one for B, which is slightly different, and then enterprise product A, enterprise product B. So simple examples here, but this is real world stuff. And if you look at this, it starts to really get out of hand. You almost have to keep a spreadsheet of what you changed and where to decide, well, gosh, if I need to make a change to the standard guide, how many other things does it affect downstream that I have to go in and edit? And that's a very inefficient way to work. If you distill down to what's happening, as long as we're over here on the right-hand side of the screen, we are always hand touching and hand editing those end deliverables. The whole idea of Flare and content management in general is that we want to stay over here on the left-hand side of the screen. We want to be in a position where our procedure only exists once. If we need to make an update to that procedure, if it needs to look a little bit different, then that's okay. We go to that single procedure, we make the change, and that change is going to cascade to all of the different deliverables that we need to support. So that's the big difference between Flare and using something more traditional like Word. That's one of the problems that it solves. So how do we do all this? Well, one of the big differences is when we're working in something like Word or FrameMaker or something like that, it's more linear. We are always starting the beginning of the document and we keep writing until we get to the end. Flare doesn't work that way. We follow what's known, we follow a more granular approach, which we call a topic-based authoring approach. So in Flare, we want to think about topics. Now, topics don't have to be long, they don't have to be short. The length of the topic doesn't really matter. Topics ideally should have an identifiable purpose. They should be about a specific subject, and they should stand on their own. They should be like a complete communication. So if you're documenting a procedure, that topic could be the whole procedure. If you're documenting a concept, it could be the entire concept. So the length of it doesn't really matter, but you shouldn't need a lot of other stuff in that topic for it to make sense. So in my example here, I've got these circles. These represent my topics. So in Flare, if I want to create a user manual that just includes these highlighted topics here, well, in Flare, I can grab these topics together, stitch them together like little Lego bricks in whatever order I want, and I can produce a unique manual. But at the same time, maybe I have to produce a slightly different version of that manual for someone else, maybe in a different format altogether. Maybe this one has these green topics that I've highlighted here, and we're going to stitch them together, maybe in a slightly different order, and produce an HTML5 site that's responsive. And so many times when we look at this, when we go from a linear to this modular-based approach, we're not adding any extra work. We're just adding a lot more flexibility on how we can reuse these things in the future. And many times when we look at these topics, going to this approach, it solves a lot of problems for a lot of people, but sometimes we have to go to another level. Maybe as an example, this general troubleshooting topic here, this was used in both of those fictitious manuals that I'm generating, but maybe for that responsive HTML5 site, there's some information in there that doesn't apply. We don't want it in there. Well, in a traditional world, we'd be doing a save as exercise wherever it was written, and we'd be modifying it for this new audience. And that just sticks us in that duplicating content situation, which is what we're trying to get away from. So in Flare, we can keep general troubleshooting as a single document and customize it. And we do that with a technique called single source publishing. So fancy industry term, maybe you've heard of it. It means simply that if I've got a version of my content for audience A and a special version for audience B and an entirely different variation for audience C, I'm not going to have 3 versions to maintain. I'm putting all of my content into one procedure, and I'm going to let my software do the heavy lifting. That way we can ensure we're reusing as much content as possible. We're much more productive and can get content out the door much more quickly. And because we're adopting content as a single source, if any of us have to cross that translation bridge, we end up positioning ourselves to save a lot of money in terms of translation costs when we adopt a single source publishing workflow. So what it ends up looking like, simulation here, is that in Flare, I would start by creating my master set of source files. So this image represents perhaps my master procedure on how to get started with whatever. Now, I may need to produce some different versions of this procedure for different outputs and different audiences, so I don't want to duplicate it. What I'm going to do in Flare is with my content authored in Flare or imported from another source, and we'll talk about that. What I can do is I can mark up my source material with some special things that we call conditional tags and variables, which we're going to talk about today. And we can use these to customize our source material. So as an example, this initial paragraph here, this may be an opening paragraph for a particular audience. Maybe the folks that buy the standard version of my product, if they access the help, it's going to be HTML5, but they're the standard customer. So I'm going to give it a special color code in Flare that says, hey, this is special. This only applies to the folks that subscribe to the standard version of my software. Now I'm talking about software here, but this could easily be a training manual, perhaps a particular department. So it doesn't have to be software. It can really be anything. The second paragraph here, maybe this is an alternate opening paragraph, and this one applies to the folks that subscribe to the enterprise version of my platform. So when they access the help, I want them to see this, or the knowledge base, or whatever it is they're getting to, whatever you're calling your documentation portal. These next 2 guys down here, well, they're the same for everybody. We're going to leave those alone. But maybe this last paragraph down here, we only want to have this show up when we produce a quick start user guide for those standard customers. Maybe we have to make an install guide or an admin guide, and we only want that to show up when we go to PDF. So if content is unique for any reason at all in Flare, we can just use one of these color codes, which we call conditional tags, to identify it, which is great for the author. We know there's something special going on, but we cannot deliver this to our end users looking this way. Now, one thing about Flare topics is they're just raw, neutral XML files. They're not PDF specific. They're not responsive HTML5 specific. They're nothing until we transform them. We have to turn them into something so that they're renderable by the reader or our audience. In an XML world, there are all these complicated programmatic things that take these XML files and make them pretty, these XML transforms. The term I learned from my colleague Mike today is that some folks call it the XML alphabet soup. And a lot of our customers don't care about XSLT and XSLFO and understanding how to program them and customize them to get what they want. Our customers want things to be easy, they want it to work, and they want everything to look good. So we simplified all of those transforms and we call them publishing targets, and we just put them in Flare for you so you don't have to program them or call in developers and spend a lot of money customizing them. So in Flare, a target is like a recipe that tells Flare, well, how do we process these raw neutral files so that the output looks the way we want for the audience that we want? So I can start creating my targets. I may create one for the standard folks. I'm going to say, hey, it needs to be HTML5. It's going to include all of the content that's supposed to be there for the standard audience, but I can tell that target file, get rid of anything I've marked as enterprise and PDF. I don't want it in there. I may need to create another unique deliverable, this time for the enterprise customers. So it's going to include the enterprise content, but I can tell that target file, exclude anything marked as standard in PDF. I don't want it showing up. And then, of course, I have to create that quick start guide in the form of a PDF for my standard customers. So I can tell it include those PDF bits, the standard bits there on top, the red stuff, but get rid of anything I've marked as enterprise. I do not want that in there. And if we need a new deliverable at any point in time, we do not have to duplicate our content. We can simply produce a new publishing target, turn a few dials, and get a unique deliverable, kind of on demand. And then from there, once these recipes are defined or these targets defined, we can start building our different outputs that are unique for our deliverables. So our standard customers, they're only going to see their content in the common bits. Enterprise customers, of course, they're going to see just that blue stuff and those common elements that we left alone. And then I've got my standard PDF guide that's only going to include the content for the standard users and that PDF specific stuff. So when we remove that content, it's important to note we're not just hiding it with some smoke and mirrors, it's actually being removed. So you don't have to worry about anybody going behind the scenes on a web page and finding content that they shouldn't. It's actually gone. And these color codes, they do not show up in our output. I just put that in there to kind of have a continuity of care and flow of data. Those colors only show up in our source documents. So that's kind of the overarching big picture, but in terms of real world workflow, it's often about 3 steps. First, we want to give you the ability to import any existing content. We have importers for a number of files. We can bring in, probably the most popular is going to be Word and HTML, but we can bring in content from other tools and platforms as well, including FrameMaker, Confluence, AuthorIt, etc. If chum files, so this is on the list, if you have some old chum files laying around and you don't have the source files from whence they came, well, then, you can import those and we'll decompile them and Flare will create a source Flare project for you out of those chum files. So that is an option as well. Okay, so once we get everything imported and everything, we can of course edit that information and we can create new content within the editor. And once we do that and everything's styled and looking the way we want, then we can start getting into that publishing exercise where we can start generating output. I won't go through all of these, but probably the most popular outputs from Flare are going to be direct to PDF because you can make your PDFs look amazing, and responsive HTML5. We have a number of skins and web wrappers for producing beautiful branded responsive HTML5 sites that you can do on your own. Some other options too, we can publish directly to Salesforce Knowledge. So if some or all of your topics needs to be there, and that's going to be the presentation layer for Salesforce Knowledge, and even Zendesk, then we have plugins that allow you to do that easily so that you don't have to copy and paste content from your source into these platforms. We can publish there automatically. All right, so that's kind of the overarching workflow on the PowerPoint side. I am going to put PowerPoint away and I am going to bring up Flare, and we're going to talk a little bit about the interface at a high level. And of course, we'll get into more things as we go on today. So I'm going to put PowerPoint away and I'm going to pull up Flare now. I can't see all of you and I can't see your expression. I don't know how many of you have installed Flare or played with it, or maybe some of you were just handed a license last week and somebody said, hey, here you go, you got to learn this. So what I'm showing here, it looks like we've got a lot of folks who have never used it, which is great. So when you first install Flare and you fire it up, you're going to come to this start page here. Some folks breeze right by it. They jump right in and get going, and that's fine. But I do want to kind of give you a little orientation here. On the start page, we do give you access to our new project wizard. Of course, you can open existing projects. This does show projects that you're working on, and you have the ability to search. You can start typing stuff in here and it'll filter. So if I wanted to start a new project, I like using this button front and center. It's really easy. And it walks through this little wizard where we can choose, we can give it a name. We can choose from a variety of built-in project templates. In fact, every little project template you select here, you get a little bit of a description and a visual of what they look like. The project templates are just there to get you started and take some of the heavy lifting out of some design elements for you. We fully expect people to change these things in terms of logos and colors and buttons. Certainly you can start from scratch, but the project templates are nice if you want a little something to begin with, including some layouts and some skins and some designs. You can change anything about it. Again, it's just here to get you going. We also have a link to additional project templates. This links us out. In fact, we'll go there right now. This takes us out to our website where we have additional project templates that we're constantly designing and adding. So you can preview any of these things. There are preview links for each of them, and you can kind of peruse and jump around and see what you like. If any of these catch your eye from an initial design model, well, then you can download them for free and customize them however you want to meet your own branding requirements. Each one includes a little guide in there to show you how to change some of the major elements like main colors and logos and buttons and things. So would encourage you to pop back out here to our site. All of these templates are free, and this is sort of a living web page. We're constantly adding to this as we put out new project designs. Okay, so let's go back to Flare. I went ahead and just saved a moment. I started a project. Now, when you start a project, there's two areas on the left where you spend quite a bit of time: the Content Explorer and the Project Organizer. So the Content Explorer, let me toggle back. This houses all of our topics. All of our little Lego bricks live here. This particular template project is organized into various folders. Everything lives here alphabetically so we can organize. We can organize our topics as authors any way we want here. This is just to keep us organized. We're going to talk about what our customers see later on. But topics all live here. Every project also comes with a resources folder. The purpose of the resources folder is to house other elements that support our topics. Our style sheets, which control the look and feel of our topics. We have dedicated table style sheets to control the look and feel of our tables project-wide if we want. So if we have table designs we want to create, very easy to create and manage using table style sheets. Snippets, which we'll talk about, little reusable chunks of content live here. So various supporting files will always live in this resources folder just to keep things tidy. So if I want to start working on a file, let's go ahead and open up a topic here on the left. The Contents Explorer. So I'll double click on this topic called Basic Steps, and you'll notice that it loads in the center here. We call this our XML editor. Even though it's called an XML editor, we don't want you to have to feel like you have to even know how to spell XML to use it. We wanted to model this after something familiar like Microsoft Word. So if I want to start typing, I can. So I'm going to type some things we're going to talk about today, just so I don't forget. Okay, so if I want to type, I can, just like Microsoft Word. If I need to make a stepped procedure, like a bulleted or numbered list, I can highlight that information, and I have a quick way up here in the ribbon to make a bulleted list or a numbered list. So I'll just put in a stepped procedure. It's often common to need to work with multimedia files in our topics, rich multimedia files, so dynamic multimedia or perhaps static screenshots. We can do that easily in Flare. So in our resources folder, as I mentioned, that's where all of our images will live typically by default. Again, you can put them anywhere, but I like to keep them in there just to keep things tidy. Now, this is a template project, so when I open up this folder, you'll see a lot of image assets in here, and you can organize them however you want. But what's nice is if we were to select an image here, I'll just select this FAQs.png. We do get a little preview so we can see what it is. If I need to use that image, I can just drag and drop it into my topic. Now it looks embedded in there, but it's actually in there by reference. What do I mean by that? Well, this FAQs image may need to be used in lots of different topics that I'm authoring. And what if in the future somebody on your team comes along and says, gosh, doc team, we're using a different image for this FAQs, so you need to use this one rather. Well, in another tool like Microsoft Word, you'd be doing a lot of multi-file find and replace manually to try to swap out that image. In Flare, because we've inserted it in here by reference, if you have a new image that's called FAQs.png, you can just swap it out here, and everywhere you've inserted that image, Flare's going to update it for you in thousands of topics and documents where you've inserted it, which is a huge time saver. We can also work with multimedia files. So if I come up to the insert ribbon up here, and this is another place I can insert an image here as well. But in terms of multimedia, you may have tutorials or simulations that you may want to work with. And Flare can support many different multimedia file types in terms of compiled movie formats. You can see those here. So you can have compiled movies. You can also insert multimedia from the web. If any of your content is streaming on YouTube or Vimeo, you can drop in a link to that if it's on a streaming service there. Okay, so dropped it in. Now the editor won't play it, but when we build and preview, of course, you will. One thing I want to mention on the image support, what I did is I dropped in a PNG. Flare supports both vector and raster images, so we can support those raster images like PNGs and JPEGs. But if you're working with a lot of engineering drawings or have things in SVG or other vector images, those are supported as well. So again, that could be appropriate depending on the type of documentation you're doing, but I do want to point out that Flare supports both image file types when you're authoring. All right, so static images, multimedia files, both are supported. That's just some of the basic editing. Again, we wanted it to make it feel very Microsoft Wordish. But I want to talk about some of these concepts here, which we'll cover in a bit more detail. So I'm going to kind of start at the high level here. I want to talk, let's start with variables. If we just take a look at this first sentence here, it says, here are the basic steps for using FictionSoft Enterprise. Now, FictionSoft Enterprise, this is grayed out. It's got a funky background to it. If I wanted to change the text there, I can't. If I hover over it, Flare actually tells me this is a variable. In fact, it's a product name variable. And what the heck is a variable in Flare? Well, a variable in Flare is a placeholder for a short string of text. And the benefit to using a variable for these short strings of text is that we have a single place to define what that text is going to be project-wide. So variables are fantastic for things like product names, version numbers, company names, a copyright year, any short string of text that's going to change in the future and you're not sure what it's going to be, consider using a variable. Has anybody ever documented a software product that's in beta? Maybe the marketing team hasn't decided what it's going to be. Again, I can't see your faces, but I think I sense some of you nodding your head yes. So again, in this example, maybe this is the beta name or the code name for the product, haven't decided yet. I may need to use this product name in lots of places. In fact, Flare is kind of helpful if we start typing. So what if I said something like variables are great when using, I'm going to start typing the name of our product, which is in beta right now. Do you notice I'm getting this auto-suggestive thing pop up? So this is Flare sensing. It's saying, hey, Jen, I see you're starting to type one of these reusable objects. Do you want to go ahead and drop it in? Now, if I just kept typing, that thing will go away. But I have this auto-suggestion turned on. Now, if you don't like that as an author, you can always turn that off. I kind of like it. I want as much help as I can get when it comes to content reuse. So this is Flare just helping me. If I click enter, it drops in that product name variable for me. So again, it's an optional thing, but I think it's quite helpful, particularly if you're newer to Flare. It's just Flare helping you out. And again, just to kind of repeat based on some of the questions, on the image support, in case you didn't catch that, we do support vector and raster images, including SVG files. Okay. All right, so this is our variable dropped in. Now, this is a simple example. I only have this in 2 places, but imagine you're using this variable in thousands of different places and different topics. And what if marketing finally decides, and I don't mean to throw marketing under the bus, but what if marketing decides, hey, we've come up with a new name for our product. We're not calling it FictionSoft Enterprise anymore. We're calling it FictionSoft Pro. So guess what, doc team? I need you all to update that product name in the help, in the knowledge base, in the user guides, in the doc portal. It all has to reference FictionSoft Pro. Well, without a variable or in some other tools, you'd probably, again, be doing a lot of multi-file find and replace to find those short strings of text. Well, in Flare, because we used a variable to define that product name, we can just overwrite it quickly. Now, one thing in Flare, our variables, they're not actually stored here in our Content Explorer. They do live in our project organizer in their own folder here called variables, okay? So here's all of the variables in my project, and you can get to it from here. But one tip I always like to pass on to new users is when you're working in Flare, I love the right-click menu. I love drag and drop, and I love right-clicking, especially right-clicking, because I can often find about 99% of the things I want to do right from that context menu. And if I've just received word from marketing that we're changing that product name, I can right-click on any of those variables, and I can open up my variable set. It's just a quick way and a bit of a click saver to get to that list in the project organizer. So I chose my variable set. So this is showing me everything that's here. Right here is that product name variable. Right now it's called FictionSoft Enterprise, but we need to call it FictionSoft Pro per marketing's orders. All right, so let's update it. We'll save. Everywhere we've used that variable, when I go back here, we can see that it's updated. Again, it's a simple example, but that could be in thousands of places. It may even be in our some of our multimedia files. One thing that we provide with Flare is MadCap Capture, which is a screen capture editing tool. And again, Flare doesn't care where that image comes from. It does not discriminate, but there happens to be some pretty cool integration between MadCap Capture and Flare, including leveraging these product or these project level variables that we're using here in Flare in our capture images too. So if you've used text in your images in your screen capture and you update your variable definition here, the good news is in your text call out that you've created in Capture, it's going to go update it there as well. So it saves you from having to update those multimedia files too. So pretty powerful stuff. So for those short strings of text, think about those variables. But for little bigger chunks of content, we can use something else, which we call snippets. Now they're similar to variables. They're separate files. We insert them into our topics by reference. The difference, though, is that snippets can be styled. They can contain images and tables and movies. They can even contain variables. They look and feel and they're edited like actual topics, but I like to think of them like subtopics. Sometimes they don't really fit that mold of the topic where it doesn't really stand on its own. It's not really a complete communication. It's often there to augment the full topic. And I'll show you a quick example of what I mean. So let me pop back over to my Content Explorer where all of our topics live. Let me open up another topic here. By the way, you may be noticing that every file you open opens up across the top in our multi-document interface. All right, so here's another topic I have open. Maybe as an example, maybe these 3 steps, you can see we've got some styling information. They look a little bit different. Maybe these 3 steps is something that we have to use a lot in lots of different topics. I do not want to have to come to getting started every time I need to use this content to copy and paste it. And I certainly don't want to retype it because that's a waste of time. So what Flare allows us to do is to create what's called a snippet out of this information. So all I have to do is highlight it because I'm going to be reusing this information in the future. Right in the home ribbon here, kind of in the center, there's a little button that says create snippet. Now we have to give it a name. Snippets are separate files. I'm only going to go through this exercise once, so I'm going to just keep it simple and call it new snippets. And by default, they always hang out in the snippets folder over here on the left. So this little project folder is mimicking what's happening over here. So it's going to live here by default. You can put it anywhere, but that's where it goes to keep it tidy, just so that you can find it quickly. So I'll click create. Now, notice that my content didn't change at all. However, I can't click in there to edit anything because that whole block of content is coming from that snippet file. What if I need to use it again somewhere else? Let's pop back over to our basic steps procedure. Maybe that snippet or that procedure needs to live right here for whatever reason. Well, I don't have to copy and paste and rewrite it. I can just insert it. So we can insert snippets a few different ways. Remember I said in the beginning, I'm a huge fan of drag and drop. So I'm going to open up my snippets folder here. There's that new snippet that I created 2 seconds ago, and I'm just going to drag it over where I need it. So again, kind of like that variable, if something happens in the future and we decide we need to update that snippet, we don't have to go into all the places where we've edited or typed this text. We just manage it in our own snippet file here. So if we need to change that, maybe we don't need step number 3 anymore. Well, I'll open up that snippet. Here it is. Now I can edit this like any other topic. Okay, maybe I don't need step number 3. I'll go ahead and select that guy, delete it. When I save that change, everywhere I've used that snippet, it will update for me. So here it's updated, and here it's updated as well. Oh, we only have the 2 procedures. So again, a big time saver for those larger chunks of content that may have styling information or tables or movies that we need to use over and over again. Okay, so before we talk about the next item, which is conditional tags, which is what I talked about in the slides, I do want to point out something you may be noticing over here on the left that's a little bit different than what you may be used to, depending on the authoring environment that you're currently using. These are called our XML structure bars. This is actually patented technology, so we're kind of proud of it. And yeah, they look cool. When you hover over them, they turn blue. But we can also use these structure bars to help us and to manipulate content structurally. If you look at a lot of powerful XML editors out there, you may get something with sort of some complicated tag view, maybe even something that looks like this. Now, we don't judge. We may have some customers that like to use this and author in this way, but I don't particularly like it. I find it terribly distracting. I like that visual editor experience, something that shows a little bit about what things are going to be looking like. So what these structure bars do is these give us a visual representation of the underlying structure of the document without contaminating our writing environment with a bunch of scary looking tags. So right away, I can see I've got an H1, I've got a paragraph. Here's an ordered list with some list items. There's that snippet that we inserted. Okay, so we can see what's happening and it's very visual. And in fact, we can use it to manipulate content. For example, if you've ever done this in Word, maybe you've got a numbered procedure. I'll just use this simple example here. Maybe we decide that step number 3 needs to be step number 2. Well, I can click and drag. Everywhere I see that little arrow, that's Flair saying, yep, it's legally valid for you to put me there. So when I let go, step number 3 becomes step number 2. And all of my numbering is self-healing. So in Word, it's a very different approach, right? You have a numbered procedure, some complex numbering, you highlight your content. In Word, you got to do a cut, Control X, then you say a few prayers, and you put your cursor where you want it to go, and you click paste, and you wonder what's going to happen to your numbering scheme. Well, we're not going to run into that problem here in Flair because we're moving it structurally, okay? The last thing I want to talk about or touch on here are these condition tags, in terms of some of these the high-level single sourcing techniques. Again, those are those color codes that we use to hide or show information when we build. So this basic steps procedure, maybe I need to produce a PDF version of it and an online version of it. And there may be some content that I need to have removed depending on what I'm generating. There may be some information that's not appropriate for the PDF or the online. Well, I do not want to duplicate this basic steps procedure and edit that. I'm going to keep it as 1, but I'm going to use some conditional tags to help me out. So maybe as an example, this word basic, well, maybe that should only show up when we go to PDF. It should not be in the HTML5 output. Well, I can highlight that word. And again, my friend, the right click menu. If I right click, I get quick access to all of my project level conditions. Now, this is a template project. It only came with a handful of conditions here. We got 5 conditions. Now, in the real world, when you're using Flair, you can create any number of conditional tag sets you want. You can call them whatever you want, and you can give them whatever color you want. I'm just going to use these template ones here. So we thought we know that this word basic, that's only supposed to show up in our PDF. So I'm going to give it a little tag to let me know that it's special. Okay, What about this procedure? Maybe this is only supposed to show up when we go to PDF. It's not supposed to show up when we go to online. So I'll do the same thing, and I'll say that's a PDF only. What about this movie down here? Well, I want this to show up when we generate our responsive HTML5 site, but I don't need it to show up in my PDF because that's not going to do anybody any good. So I can right click on this, and I'm going to say that's for online only. So we can mark our source topics up however we want with these condition tags. One thing I want to point out is as you're using these conditions, you may find that your topic starts to light up a bit like a rainbow, okay? And it's sometimes helpful to see, well, how are these conditions going to play out in all the different outputs I'm generating? Well, one nice thing about Flare is that we do allow you to, Flare makes it easy to preview the topics. We don't have to compile the whole project and hone in on these different elements and the different deliverables to see how those conditions are looking. You do get a handy little preview window up here. In fact, this little arrow, what this is showing us are all of the different target outputs that we've got set up in our project. So we can preview this in any of our outputs. So what if I want to see how this is going to look in HTML5? So let's go ahead and open that guy up. So we'll look at the source and we'll compare. Here, let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see. So here's what now it's not showing everything, it's just sort of a quick compile of this topic. But we can see here that the word basic is gone because we said, hey, we don't want that PDF stuff in there. There's my movie. But notice that step number 2 has been removed because that's a PDF specific, that's a print specific procedure. So even though Flare got rid of it, it's also, the numbering is self-healing here as well. We're not left with anything like 1 and 3, right? Just because we got rid of this one in the middle. It's going to take care of all of that numbering for you, should you choose to remove it. And if we were to compare it with PDF, we can preview it in one of our PDF guides. And we can see, let me make this bigger, that because this is PDF, of course, the word basic is there, because we said we want, that's a print specific thing, don't exclude it. Step number 2 is there for our print, but our movie is gone. So we don't have that multimedia file there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on today, but I did want to give a quick overview on just the basics on how these work, okay? So that's a little bit about conditions. Now, I want to transition a little bit in the next little bit of time here, and I want to talk about generating output because we can generate lots of different things. One thing I want to mention is that with our Content Explorer, all of our topics live here, and one thing that when I was new to using this and I was getting used to Flare, I would look at the Content Explorer and I'd practice sort of moving things around, which you can do. Maybe this topic needs to go in another folder and you can do that. But one thing that was really flummoxing is I'd see this structure and be like, okay, this is like a getting started chapter. And I wanted what's new to be first in this chapter. And every time I try to click and drag and move it, Flare would always drop that file back alphanumerically. Well, that's exactly what this Content Explorer is supposed to do. Only the authors managing this content can view and see this organization. This is just for us to stay organized and stay tidy. Our customers are never going to see this, and they're never going to see this order. What our customers see is something different, a different file altogether. They see what's called a table of contents. So that's a separate file in our Flare project. So it's a project level file. So I'm going to switch to the project organizer, which stores a lot of the project level gears. I pop back over to the project organizer, I'll close the variables up. TOCs live in their own folder. So again, TOC stands for Table of Contents. In Flare, it plays a really important role. This is the file that lets us stitch together whatever topics we want in a given order. It's the piece that lets us organize our topics together for an output. This is what our customers are going to see. So it's not uncommon to have more than one table of contents in the project, because the different outputs you're producing may have a slightly different order of topics, depending on who's going to be looking at it, okay? So let's open up one of these. I'll open up this one called Online Output. So this is sort of like our outline, okay? This is the order of things that our customers are going to see. And now we can move things around and we can, drag them into different areas. It's not necessarily going to be alphabetized. If I want basic steps to be first, I can drag that topic wherever I need it to go. I can create additional top-level books, nested books. I can get as granular as I want here. Here's a book nested in a book. So this is that topic organization that our customers will see when we generate. If we need to include another topic in this table of contents, again, our friend drag and drop, it's as easy as that. So if I created a new topic, or if I need to use a topic in my Content Explorer here, I'll just grab one, like tables. Maybe I need this to go in this chapter for whatever reason. Well, I can just click and drag it and put it where I want it to go. I can also use these little arrows up here if I want to move things right or left or up and down. So either way, we have the option to stitch these things together in whatever order we want. So we've created some content, we've edited this content. I want to transition a little bit here in our last 15 minutes of this module, and I want to talk about building output because that's important too. We've got our topic organization here. We've got all of our content developed. Our project organizer, let me pop back over there. Remember I mentioned in those PowerPoint slides, we had that concept of a target file. That's that XML transform that takes our raw topics and makes them pretty, makes them viewable and renderable. So in the project organizer, our target files live in their own folder. And again, you can have as many targets as you want in your project. This particular template project has it organized into online based targets and print-based targets. You can organize it however you want. You can name these things whatever you want. Let's open up one of these recipe files and we'll talk a high level on some of the dials here. Won't go through everything, but we're going to touch on some of the biggies. So first off, the target file, we want to tell it what are we actually making. Well, it's already set to build HTML5, but as you can see, we can build any number of outputs here. So this is an HTML5 site, we'll keep it at that. We also want to tell the target file what table of contents do we want to use, what topics and in what order do we want them to be displayed. So for this HTML5 site, we were just editing that TOC called online output. So that's the TOC that I want to use, but just know that we can choose any TOC we want in our project. Conditional text, this is where we tell the target file, those color codes that we're using. What do we want to include and exclude? And what's nice is Flare actually kind of gives us an explicit action here, what's going to happen. We can see right away the PDF tag, that's going to be excluded from this online deliverable. Those online ones, those are included. So this is where we can turn that conditional text dial to control what actually shows up in the output. I'm going to give it a second. I just got a message that my audio is a little dicey, so I'm looking at my go-to console, and I think I'm back. Again, I will say I did say a prayer to the internet gods and goddesses out there, hoping they're on our side with all of these bandwidth issues that we're experiencing. So apologies if it does cut out. I'll do my best to keep that going. All right, so conditional text, we tell it what we want to include, what we want to exclude. Variables, Mike's going to talk a little bit about this later today. But we can also override our project level variables at the target level. This is something that's really cool. It's a powerful feature. Remember, we changed that from FictionSoft Enterprise to FictionSoft Pro. If we want to right here, we can override this and have it say whatever we want. Maybe we need the product name here to say Flare. Well, if this definition, this override that I just made, it's not going to affect any other deliverable that I'm producing. It's not overriding anything at the project level. I'm just changing it at the target level here. So we're going to dynamically overwrite that definition, which is really a powerful feature. And that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and click Build. Now, because we can generate, one thing I forgot to mention in the beginning, in terms of our Flare topics, we also separate out content from the look and feel. So all of the formatting stuff is separate from the topic files themselves. So when we build this target file, we're also pulling in our style sheet information, our skin information in terms of that wrapper around everything. If we're producing PDF, it's pulling in our page level templates. So we can quickly create different looking sites and PDFs pulling from the same pool of content, even with slightly different look and feel. So I just built that right now. I don't know if you saw that, it went quickly. Just for fun, I'm going to build a similar site, same content, but I'm going to show you how easy it is to have it look different just by choosing a few different things in our target file. So I'm going to build this side navigation HTML5. This one's using a slightly different skin. So the skin we can choose here, I skipped over this, apologies. I'm telling this top navigation site to use the top navigation skin. This one, while it's running, it's pulling in my side navigation skin. So let's take a look at what we made. And we'll open this up. Now, this is our responsive HTML5, what we call top nav. We call it top nav because we took the table of contents that you often see down the left-hand side of a site or a knowledge base or a help file, whatever it is you call it. And we put that table of contents across the top to make it more like a modern website or like a modern portal. So this is our navigation that we were building out. The other thing with this top nav site is for this particular template project, and by the way, I'll mention, this is one of our bone stock out of the box. I didn't customize anything at all. This is just a basic out of the box template. So please take the look and feel of these things with a grain of salt. Logos can be changed, colors can be changed, this roundedness of the search, this text can be changed. All of that can be configured in Flare. One of the files in our project organizer that we don't have time to show today, but we can certainly talk about it after the fact, is called a skin editor. And the skin editor lets you change and dial in various stylistic elements about the logo, the size of this header. The skin is this outer wrapper around everything that we're seeing here and controlling the placement of the table of contents. So we have lots of different skin templates to choose from, and you can create your own, really so that it looks branded and customized and looks like a seamless experience to your corporate site for your readers. For this particular template, we wanted the search to be front and center. What do people do when they get stuck in the real world? We go to Google and we search. So we wanted this to feel very familiar. If I search for the word topic here, we can see I get some googly style results. And again, the way this looks can all be configured in your skin file. You can get really creative. I always say with skins that beauty is in the eye of the beholder when it comes to this stuff. So you'll take some of this with a grain of salt. We also did this interesting thing here. This is actually a glossary term. So, have you ever done a search in Google on a word and Google seems to sort of read your mind and it just provides the definition of it at the top? Well, we're sort of mimicking that here with our glossary. If you're documenting a lot of technical terms and they've got really specific text-based definitions, consider building a glossary. It's really easy to do in Flare. My template project had a sort of a basic glossary in there, but imagine just a table with a term, you define it, another term, you define it, and if your reader searches on that term, it's going to show up at the top of all of your results. So it's a great way to increase the usability of all this technical content that you're documenting, particularly if you've got a lot of specific industry or technical jargon that you're documenting in your content. So think about creating a glossary. They do show up at the top, very similar to how Google does it. This is responsive out of the box. So if I go back here to my home page, if I were to access this on a smaller screen size, perhaps a tablet or a mobile phone, let's shrink this down and maybe I'll see if I can replicate this here. So watch what's happening. So I'm making this more narrow, okay? So that's as far as mine will go, but you get the idea. Notice that my navigation changed. I have this handy little hamburger menu here that I could tap on my phone and I could get access to the navigation if I needed to on the smaller screen size, okay? Everything works appropriately. If we go back to that home screen though, so the skin responds, but also the content, my topic content responds as well. So the layouts and our topics can be responsive. And many of our template projects have these built with these responsive layouts in mind so that you don't even have to think about it. It takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of your work. Now we don't have to use our thumb and our index finger to navigate around on the page. Everything stacks appropriately, okay? So that's our top nav. So let's take a look at one of the other ones we built. Let me go back to Flare. While we're at it, I forgot to build a PDF. Let me go and build that. Let's take a look at our side nav. So this is also responsive HTML5, but notice that it looks a little bit different. Just by switching the different skin, again, it's the same content, but we can have this stuff look however we want since we separate content from look and feel. So here's our table of contents down the side rather. Okay, so here's that basic steps topic we were just working on. There's our video that we inserted. So again, everybody's a little bit different in terms of their personal preference and look and feel. We give you these side nav and top nav templates out of the box that you can change and customize. It is searchable again. So if I search for something like image, I do get it. Now this one happens to be using, in addition to the MadCap search, which is great out of the box, we also support what's called Elasticsearch, which isn't anything we invented. It's an open source enterprise search technology, and it's something that we're all used to seeing when we search on Amazon or shopping sites. You'll notice as I'm starting to type the word image, I get these sort of predictive responses. Well, that's Elasticsearch working behind the scenes. It's free, you don't have to pay for it. We give you the opportunity to switch out and use Elasticsearch in your flare target. That's one of the other dials you can change in your recipe file if you want to use Elasticsearch rather. And it does offer some additional benefits. I love the predictiveness of Elasticsearch. I think that's really cool. The other thing I like about Elasticsearch, it's really good at this fuzzy matching. So let's say I'm going fast and I search for image and I misspell it. Well, you get that did you mean experience. So that's kind of nice too. And it also searches and retrieves non-flare topics. If you're publishing things like Word docs or Office docs as part of your overall output, it'll search and find documents and retrieve them in the results too. So a little bit extra setup on the Elasticsearch, not too much. We document how to do it and we could certainly help you, but it is free and it's something you might want to consider to increase the usability and the search in your output. So I did want to mention that. Okay, so that's what we made. Let's go back quickly in the last few minutes because I do want to show you some real world stuff too. Let me open up that PDF file we made. Now, again, even with this PDF, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm just using the stock print template that comes out of this template project. And so if we need to adjust things like the margins here, the size, let me get to a single page view that may look a little bit nicer. Sorry about that. The way the cover page looks, there are page level templates, a little bit like our web-based skins. We have a file in Flare called a page layout, and the page layout file is the piece that controls our pagination, our margins, the actual size. Is it 8.5 by 11? Is it A4? Is it smaller than that? So dynamically generated table of contents, everything's hyperlinked. So our page layout, again, this is just the stock one. Got some basic margins. It's controlling our pagination here, our headers and footers. So again, all of this can be changed and edited in your page layout to make it look the way you want. In fact, let me use that in the last few minutes as a segue. Let me pull up my web browser here. I want to talk about show some other examples. Now, we don't always get to see what our customers make with our output because oftentimes it is behind firewalls. But when we do find externally facing examples, we love to show them off. So I grabbed a few examples here of some real world outputs that come from Flare just to kind of see what's possible. And you'll see how different they look because everybody can use their own corporate branding and styling requirements to meet these needs. So here's a company called Okta. I don't know if you've heard of Okta. They're big in the SSO space. So they use Flare for all of their product documentation. So here they used one of our side nav templates and customized it. So they can, again, looks very different from what we just saw because they have their own style sheet that they're using to control the look and feel of our topics. So this is their look and feel, okay? Here's another company called Highbond, okay? So they're using one of our templates that they've totally customized to meet their own branding requirements, okay? So we can go into one of their topics here. They have some fun buttons here. They're localizing this into many different languages, so we can toggle between the different languages if we want to here. But again, it's all meeting their look and feel requirements, and this is all authored and published right out of Flare. Here's a quick PDF example. So a company called Cognex, so they make a lot of hardware. They have very specific look and feel requirements in terms of their pagination. In fact, if we go to one of these here, and I believe they're using detailed image, so I believe these are SVGs, I can't remember, but they have very detailed engineering drawings that they need to support out of Flare. So if you're more on the hardware side, this is a really nice example. In fact, they do another one too. I think I have a minute. Let me just show real quick. One of them has different margins set up. This is it. So this is they use a slightly different layout for this guide. This actually comes in the box that when you buy their piece of equipment, this is folded up a certain way. So it had to be a certain size. So they've got slightly different margins and layouts here for this one. So obviously not 8.5 by 11 or A4. It's much smaller. One other one, kind of a longer one. Let's see, I thought I had it here. So Visa, maybe you heard of them, big company. They use Flare for a lot of their policies and procedures and documentation. This happens to be a publicly facing product and service rules guide, just a small 869-page manual that's authored and published directly out of Flare. So they use their page layouts to create their own specialized headers and footers. So here we go. They even have a summary of changes. This is their footer information, so it looks consistent across all of their different PDF outputs. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I want to be respectful of the breaks that we have and for what we're going to talk about next. My clock says just 10:59, so we are right on track. We are getting some great questions that we're going to try to get to. I know Mike's trying to get to them behind the scenes too. We're going to pause for 15 minutes, give everybody a quick mental break, and we're going to come back at 11:15, and we're going to talk about Central next. So we'll go ahead and help you guys out if possible, but we'll be back in 15 minutes and we'll pick it right back up again.